Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also, but as stated, the debaters won't actually debate what's actually argued. Instead, they just keep saying the same crap over and over and just ignore all the counter arguments. Alright, so this whatever Chilean, this whatever 9921 guy who has no accountable content on his channel, so we know nothing about who he is or what he pretends to be or any of that crap. So anyway, just this bad screen name, that's all we get. So he's continued to comment, and big pile of crap here, as you can see. It's more and more of it, two of them. Yeah, and it's just this jargon. It's just like the religious apologist. It's just somebody who's trying to make excuses for their wrong theory of who is the Messiah, and it's just the same thing. So his first sentence is just so glaring. Science needs experiments to be anything more than a religion. Right, and that's exactly what's being argued. You have no experimental evidence. The science hasn't done any of the obvious experiments. I mean, they're so glaringly obvious. Okay, they've never repeated the Eddington experiment from space, 400 times better resolution, and they've never even attempted, we're supposed to believe they've never even attempted the experiment from space, 400 times. Better capacity to do the experiment, 400 times better seeing. Okay, I mean, if I gave you 400 times better vision, you would be overwhelmed by the intensity of the detail you could see. It's a huge, gigantic advantage, and they never even attempted. An experiment takes 5 minutes. You don't need an eclipse from space. It's ridiculous, okay? They assert the Leibnizian dogma, the Leibnizian holy words, okay, that somehow 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same as 1 pound dropped 4 feet. Same energy. They haven't done that experiment in 350 years. It's never occurred to a physicist to, hey, maybe we should do that and see if it actually happens. See if we can actually prove something, okay, with an experiment. No. And then I'll illustrate one of the ones that, for me personally, is just so glaring. Just proves they are totally uninterested in the truth, getting anywhere near it, finding it. It's just a religion, and they're just singing hymns, okay? There's nothing else. They're just, their formulas are their little hymns, and they're just going to sing them till the end of time, apparently. And that's all it's about, is singing your hymns. All right, so we don't need this. All right, so classic experiment. That's really shadow blighted. Is the two-slit, right? I mean, all of this crap about this two-slit experiment, and they've never bothered to do what kind of this whole wave idea, right? So the idea is that some kind of wave pops out, all right? It interferes with itself, even in the single slit. Somehow the single wave interferes with itself and creates an on-off pattern. There's no wave. There's no other wave coming out. So then they invent this silly Huygens crap, and there's an infinite number of little waves, and the little waves, they're interfering somehow. Anyway, too silly, right? We know there's no interference in water with a single slit. All right, so we do the double slit to create our interference capacity. All right, and the argument is that this double slit will end up creating a on-off pattern, okay, that will create places in space where there is, where they're in phase and then they're out of phase. And the fact is they get smaller as they go towards the top. So that's just a fact of the geometrical circumstance. So you have this expectation that photons are going here, and then they're going here, and then they're going here, and then they're going here. And the fact is they're supposed to. If it's a wave theory is correct, there should be photons that actually do land over here. Now, not too often, so you just run the experiment a very long time and see if you get anything over here, right? So they've never done this experiment. They've never taken a piece of photographic film and just put a piece of photographic film around the experiment, and obviously a bunch of photons will go here and it'll be completely whited out. But do you get any this way? They can't answer the question because they've never done the experiment, okay? An experiment that simple, they've never even done it. And then they'll tell you, no particle theory can explain. Have you tried any particle theories? Have you thought about any particle theories? And so the simple thing is that no physicist, okay, no accountable physicist, let's just say, except for maybe Einstein, even speculated. You know, it's hard to say what Einstein believed because Einstein was way too brief in his explanations of everything. Okay, so whether he believed light quanta, like a photon, was made of light quanta, or whether he was calling the photon itself a light quanta, all right, it's a little bit hard to understand. But clearly the simple explanation for a particle theory would be not to say a photon is a baseball. The idea is to say a photon is a group of baseballs coming at a frequency. So a certain number of baseballs, okay, at a frequency, and that the fact is that when they hit a surface, they're capable of adding energy to an electron. The first one hits, and then the second one hits, and then the third one hits in sequence. And that sequence pushes electricity through a surface in the sense of pushes electrons. And with each push, the electron retains a little bit more energy, goes a little bit faster, and eventually you end up with a escape velocity. Okay, the electron has the escape velocity, so it's dependent on the frequency and hitting the electrons with a fast enough period where you're adding energy to the electron system. Okay, now that simple explanation works. You're not going to find any flaw in it. You're not going to find any defect in it. You're not going to find, you're not going to express anything or explain anything. So I've made all these videos. They're on the website. Okay, every subject of just about is covered, from thrust through gravity to magnetism and electricity, all covered. Charge, 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics, the overview video. So you're not going to deal with any of the actual arguments I've made, and you're just going to do this crap where you say something as stupid as science is about experiments, when that's exactly the point. They haven't done any. We have to go to the Mythbusters to find even a car crash experiment. They haven't even done that. They haven't even just crashed two things into a brick wall and measured how much energy it has. All right, and the fact is the answer, when they actually do the experiment, somebody actually does it, is no, there's no evidence of 4 times the energy. And I guess if they do it at 3 times the speed, there's not going to be any evidence 9 times the energy. There's certainly no common evidence, common everyday experiential evidence that it takes 25 times the fuel to go 5 times faster. That is, to go 10 miles an hour versus 50 miles an hour, that somehow it takes 25 times more fuel. That's an obvious no, it doesn't. All right, and again, to get rid of any silly relativity catches, you know, Holy Ghost catches of your magical theory, if I just use a spinning object, the fact is there's no evidence that a water wheel moving twice as fast has 4 times the energy, or a water wheel moving 3 times as fast has 9 times the energy. It's all crap, okay? And you take no account for any of it, and you don't counter any of the arguments I just made. Okay, you don't explain how, oh, it makes sense that they haven't done this, you know, photographing photons in the 2-slit experiment. Why would they do that? Oh, it doesn't make any sense that they'd repeat the Eddington experiment from space where there's 400 times better resolution. Yeah, bullshit. That's all you have. All right. So he starts the comment with just a steaming pile of shit. You know, with this idea that somehow they have gotten evidence, that they have somehow done all the experiments. No, they've done nothing except search for the Holy Ghost. They've spent billions and trillions of dollars searching for Holy Ghosts. All right, gravitational waves and neutrinos. But redoing the Eddington experiment, nope, they can't even bother expending $50. All right, you say a lot, but then you think since something is old, So that's nowhere does it say anything about that it must be right. So where did I say anything like that? Where did I imply anything like that? Clearly, I'm saying Leibniz was old, and I'm saying he was so full of shit. It's incredible. This is the best of all worlds because God says so. He's an idiot. All right. I mean, fuck you. Okay, so I never said that. You fucking child molester. Anyway, without testing, you can't learn. So again, he's implying that they have tested something. And the simple truth is they've tested nothing. They've done nothing to dissect the truth. And look at their tests. Okay, I mean, Deschardelet denting clay with round objects. Can you understand that if you dent something with a round object, that is, you don't penetrate all the way, that the shape of the surface will change how far something might go in? Like the pointier my arrow is, the further it might go into something, and it's not showing that it has more energy, it's just showing that the shape can change the penetration rate, right? Can you understand, you fucking moron, that it's not a credible way to measure energy to dent clay with round objects? Science is built on trying to disprove and prove things. So it's just more saying they've done it and they haven't done it. Saying that we've done all this, we've been very careful and we don't jump to conclusions and we compile a ton of evidence. No, you haven't done any of that. That's the absolute fucking goddamn fact. All right, is that you haven't done any of the experiments, and then you lie about the ones you have done. Oh, we have photon detectors that we put on the slits, and we detect the photons, and then we don't get the pattern when we detect, we detect the photons. Never happened. You lie about the truth, and you're defending the lies. All right, we can't learn anything new unless we know to do experiments to test things. So again, the point is there's no experiments. They haven't done the simplest experiments. They haven't even taken the ballistic pendulum, for example. The bullet goes into the ballistic pendulum. You're claiming thousands of joules of energy were converted into something without using any momentum, of course. So you didn't lose any momentum, but you converted a whole bunch of energy. And there's a whole bunch of energy still in that pendulum somewhere. Have you ever measured it? Did you ever measure the temperature? No. Have you rolled a ball across the surface and then measured how hot the surface got? No. You haven't done any of these experiments, you lying piece of scum. Okay. I don't even care to argue about whether you're right or wrong. You don't care to argue whether or not one theory fits the evidence or one theory doesn't fit and doesn't even have evidence. And spin's going to come up later in this, and it's just so ironic because it's such a perfect example. They're so dishonest about vocabulary, and he's going to actually reference a video where the guy basically says that, yeah, nothing's spinning, it's just a big pile of shit. Okay, because unless you can prove something is worthless. So again, that's just nonsense. We can never prove anything absolutely, and the point is you're at trial and you're trying to compile evidence. All right, and have enough evidence to say something with confidence. And that's the argument. When are you allowed to say something with confidence? Are you allowed to say that no particle theory can explain when you tried no particle theory, when you made no effort to see if any particle theory could explain? These are your lies, okay? Those are important in court also, when you show that the witness is totally unreliable, that they say they did things they never did. All right. The street goes both ways, and that's the hypocrisy that you have. You will sit there and find the deficiencies in my evidence, but you won't find any in the deficiencies in your evidence, right? Isn't that all you're really saying is that you have to prove, I don't have to, I can just say, I can just assert? That's all you're saying. Maybe physics has it wrong, but you need a pretty good amount of experimental evidence. I don't need any experimental evidence. The experimental evidence that already exists is completely consistent with the physics I'm arguing. So right there, I have plenty. I can just show the oscillating balance, okay, with a 4 mass 1 distance on this side and a 1 mass 4 distances on that side. I can play that all day long and say your physics is full of shit because there's not 4 times the energy on this side. It's an oscillator. Okay, jackass. And, you know, so I win. Yeah, you lose. Okay. Maybe physics has it wrong. Okay. The experimentalist to show that. Okay, it's like, fuck you. There's nothing this is like, unfortunately, because, you know, really, you don't want to have to. It's not like physics is a complete fable, but I guess you could say the example is the same in that the fable only has strength in a field of ignorance, and as soon as a theory like evolution shows up, then all of a sudden it doesn't have any strength because there is an alternative. So the fact is that nobody could present an alternative theory that actually works, and nobody explained, like I said, the most elemental function, which is charge. Now I've given the most simplistic way to describe charge you could possibly contrive or create. There's just no, I would argue that even if somebody tried to fake it, they couldn't make something simpler. And it's just so fucking simple. And, you know, I'm not going to redraw that again, but in this video, because I've done it in so many other videos. But just watch the video on charge. All right? And it perfectly fits. It perfectly creates the Maxwellian drawing of how a charge functions. And it's such a simple mechanism. So fuck you. All right, it's like if the math works. So this is another argument you jackasses keep saying, is that your math works when it doesn't work in the double slit. Okay, I mean, if you measured, you know, if you actually measured the centers of your waves, right? Your wave centers are what creates the pattern. If you actually use that math in light, you won't get the right answer. You won't place the on-off pattern in the right location, because the fact is that the center, that is the places where the phase difference takes place, is the surfaces. So your math is surface math, yet you're saying you're measuring waves. I mean, you've got to be able to understand some of these arguments are so fucking simple, and it's just like, oh, fuck you in the ass till dead, pretending you can't understand. All right, I mean, your math does this silly thing to the double slit. You have 2 waves. Your math uses this measurement, or it uses this measurement, depending on whether it wants to do the envelope pattern or the little pattern. And shouldn't it be using this and this? If it was a water wave, this is the dimensions you would use, the centers of the wave. You couldn't get the right answers if you used the surface's dimension. This is the dimension that creates the pattern in water waves, the center of the waves. So that's your big lie again, that somehow there's some kind of great consistency in your math and that it's applied in this great consistent manner, when bullshit it is. Again, I could drop something into Earth, okay? MGH. Oh, well, all of a sudden, MGH doesn't work, fails completely if I give anything an initial velocity going into a gravitational field. So if I do this MGH thing, but this object already is going 500 miles an hour, your formula fails to get the right answer, dismally fails. Where MGT gets the right answer in both circumstances. So, fuck you again. Over and over. Alright. Let's see. It's like if the math works, anything could be possible, but you need actual experimental results. So again, where is your evidence that you have experimental results? Where? In almost every case, it's a complete void of experimental results to be able to say if the math is truly right. So it's glaring. You haven't even crashed cars into walls. You haven't done pendulums. You haven't done any experimental. There's no experimental evidence except contrived experiments. Let's make a low friction cart that has metal wheels. So because we don't understand that wheels rotate and they hide your linear motion in your angular rotation. Say a tank with a big heavy metal treads on it. Okay, it's going 50 miles an hour. It's really got the momentum of something going 60 miles an hour because of all the rotational energy and all that heavy mass. The heavy mass of its drivetrain, okay, that's rotating, has a ton of stored energy in it. Do you understand that physics, fucktard? God damn. On the theory thing, the idea of the nucleus having protons and electrons together is quite an odd theory. No, old theory. So old in what context? Okay, obviously nobody knew electrons and protons, that there was just two elemental functional objects. Okay, north, south, positive, negative. And they had this inverse relationship. So you're talking what, 100 and what years? It's not that old, fucktard. I heard it in a video I've watched before. Okay, so I wonder, that's a pretty vague reference. And what, again, it's, yeah, so he should at least be able to produce that, right? I mean, clearly it is way out of their assumption. Okay, all they say is somehow the nucleus is positively charged, therefore somehow it doesn't have any negative components. Okay, because it's a net positive. When obviously the simple explanation is that yes, it has half as many electrons as it has protons in it, and that's why it's net positive. Okay, and was wondering more if you would independently come upon the idea or if you heard it from some older source. Well, I don't have to answer that question. You could just research the videos on this channel and you would find out that all of it, okay, is original. It just has to do with fitting the evidence. The whole point is that, I certainly knew on the face of it, what they were saying was nonsense. I knew there was no wave-particle duality. As soon as they told me about all this superposition nonsense, they think these things poof in and out of existence, I knew their theory was wrong, and there has to be a better answer. And all I did was go look for that better answer, and I found it. I am talking you come upon this. I am talking you come upon this independently. All right, that's a really bad sentence. Did you do that all on your own? Yeah. I mean, that's what it says. I am talking you come upon this independently. That's a sentence somehow. Anyway, the man who came up with this before was called Rutherford. No, not really. He did that to the entire atom, not just the nucleus. But regardless, I'm sure you've heard of him before. Yeah, and so the whole point is that his rational definition of the idea that there's just a mixture of electrons and protons, which is a better idea, frankly, was, frankly, is better than some silly idea that electrons are orbiting something. So the idea that stuff has positions, like raisins has a position in raisin bread, in my opinion, is a more rational theory about how things combine and how they connect to each other than some silly idea that you can do this figure eight thing. That I'm sharing an electron by moving it over here and then over here and then over here, and that somehow it doesn't crash. The velocities are perfect. I mean, it's when you think about just the engineering of it, being able to maintain a perfect figure eight orbit. Imagine throwing something towards the moon and throwing it so perfectly that it figure eights between the Earth and the moon gravitationally. What are the odds? Oh, I'd say they're pretty much zero. All right. So on the way I was talking, that's another sentence. Okay, I tend to think of, well, I guess it's a comma there, sorry. I tend to think of charge as electromagnetic charge. Well, I mean, what's the point? It's a baby talk. I think of charge as charge. Yeah, I think it's chargy. It's full of charginess. It's so full of all that chargerosity. Very chargy. Okay, and then mass as gravities charge more or less the way we describe them. And do I fucking goddamn give a rat's ass what you fucking think? I tend to think. Fuck you. Why should I pay any attention? You don't make any videos. You don't back it up with anything. You're just going to make a comment and tell me what you think. Did I solicit understanding what you think? Do I think you have any hope of doing any good thinking? And this is how you do it in comment sections on other people's videos? Oh, what a pile of shit that is, fucktard. I mean, this is just, I have to debunk you. No, I have to debunk standard physics. I don't have to debunk your perversion of it. So here you are defending it, and now you're just going to pervert it and say, well, I think they're right about this, but I think they're wrong about that. And I don't have any standards for that. I just decide which one I like better. Which one's more fun? What theory has more funerosity in it? Oh, you fucking pieces of shit. I mean, there's no way I'm going to get through all this drivel. Okay, thinking of the strong force, the thing that kind of makes the least sense is the three charges which are named red, blue, and green. So why would anybody even why would you believe in this special force anyway? As I explained, when all you need is an electron. You shove an electron between two protons, and if you thought of them as magnets, it's kind of obvious what's going to happen. Even by Maxwell's own drawings, it's obvious what's going to happen. Right? I mean, obviously, if I negate the capacity of the two protons to see each other, okay, they can't know each other exists, and I put something in between that's attractive to both, that the two protons are going to get really close to each other, right? It's such a simple explanation. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say any more than this to a reasonable, logical person, that if you had two theories to believe, magical strong force that just shows up out of nowhere and then disappears out of nowhere, or, well, you just stick an electron between two protons and obviously the two protons get really close. They just can't see each other. That the universe, even if I was to argue that the universe is really made out of objects and they just see each other, that's all that's happening. They see each other. They see each other. Everything in the universe is just the force goes in and the force pops back out, and they see it, right? They see a change, right? If I put this pen in front of the camera, it looks different than my hand, right? Why does it look different? Why is it a different color? Why is it all that stuff? Because this hand is absorbing some of the energy and reflecting some different energy, and this one's doing something very different. It's reflecting and absorbing different frequencies, and so I see something different. Can you understand? So that's what electrons and protons are doing. They're seeing each other. Everything sees each other. The force hits it and comes back out of it. Everything is in a kind of equilibrium. Okay, except for the the fact that you can put the energy in, heat the object, and then the energy can take its time leaving. Okay, so you can change when the energy, the equilibrium is restored, but the idea is that yes, everything is going to be at equilibrium. That is, you can't destroy the energy, and it's always either moving or it's trapped inside of something. But those are the only two modes for energy. Oh, this is just so obvious. So you won't concede that's a glaringly better explanation, sticking an electron between two protons, than some nonsensical notion that there's some magical force that shows up to do the most powerful thing in the universe, which is shove two protons into each other. Fuck you. Alright, so anyway, named red, blue, and green, but this actually is something that makes it harder to understand and easier to disprove, as why would a force have three values that all attract, and I don't think they repel each other. So again, you're just making my point for me, aren't you? That it starts off with a wrong premise, and then they just create Holy Ghost and, whatever, Sister Catherine and the Holy Mother's stepdaughter, and they just create a whole bunch of fake crap to try to fix what's insanely silly. Also, I think you are kind of taking the words potential energy too literally. I mean, isn't that amazing? No, I'm doing exactly the opposite. I'm saying that you shouldn't use physics language this in exactly. So again, later he's going to post a link to one video, okay, a stupid video talking about electron spin where the guy basically says, yes, I was taught this, it was all bullshit. If you're going to have a conversation about physics, it ought to be exact. You shouldn't be talking absolute bullshit. All right, and this is exactly the point, is that the idea that the energy is potential when you've stored it somewhere is fine. The idea that something has energy, and if I choose to stick my finger in a stream, I can give my finger energy, I can absorb energy with my finger, that's perfectly reasonable. But some idea to say this word potential energy, that something, okay, this thing has potential energy, when all I'm saying is well, yeah, if I let it fall 5 feet, it's going to have more energy than if I let it drop 10 feet. If I let it drop 20 feet, it's got even more potential energy. Wouldn't that be a silly way of describing this? This has no energy. The gravity has the energy, okay? The whatever the mechanism is, you don't have one, a bent geodesic. The bent geodesic will give it energy, but it doesn't have any energy. Sitting here right now, it has zero fucking goddamn potential energy. It doesn't have anything in there. There's no energy. Zero. It hasn't absorbed anything yet. Its mass isn't fucking moving. Its mass hasn't stored energy. Its mass hasn't done any of that shit. And it has to fall. It has to be pushed by the paint, by the rain, by the stream. It has to acquire the motion. It has to absorb it. Can you understand the word absorb? Okay. Like when somebody says this, what they mean is if you add some other energy to it to allow the force of gravity to pull it back, so there's no pull force. Oh, amazingly, people are so fucking stupid. To the ground, it will act upon it. Yeah, it's a stream of energy. It's as simple as photons. You can imagine them as invisible little chons. They are streaming towards the center of the earth in a disproportional amount. There's ones coming out, and there's ones going in. And for 5 coming in, there's only 4 coming out. And the differential is the earth is hot as fucking hell inside. The pressure is, the heat is evidence of all of the action, and all of the action is evidence of energy that has been extracted. Energy that used to be free, moving through space at the speed of light, and now that energy is stuck, moving electrons and protons in the center of the earth. That's the differential, you fucktard. Okay. Equilibrium, but when you act on it, it will continue to move due to the forces now being able to fully act on it. Yeah, so exactly. So you're conceding my point. Your physics is full of jargon and nonsense. I'm not the one fucking up the word potential energy. Obviously, your physics is the one turning it into nonsense. By not recognizing the difference between the energy stored in, say, gunpowder, the energy stored in a spring. All of these mechanisms store the energy in a different way. Okay, but it's truly stored in the sense that you take a system that's at equilibrium and you break that equilibrium and cause disruption in it. There's stress, there's motion, okay? A crane is holding up a weight. I have a metal crane, it's holding up a weight. The fact is there's a bunch of stress. There is tension in there, and I can prove it by making the metal weaker and weaker, thinner and thinner. And there'll be a point where I'll be able to see the fact that it's real stress, that the metal's doing real work, because it'll start to bend. Fuck you. All right. Jesus. God, what a fucking little bastard. Anyway. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there's another link. I'll have to go see what that piece of shit is. Alright. I might just probably have to... I'll break this into numerous videos. Also, on spin... So, I didn't think that was in this first comment, but apparently it is. Let's just say, yeah, that's the second comment. He's talking more about spin. So I don't know why this obsession with spin, not a terribly interesting subject, frankly. Also on spin, the name is weird. Okay, now obviously the idea of something spinning isn't complicated at all. It's pretty simple. And the simple truth is spin in terms of an elemental spin couldn't mean anything, especially on a spherical object. So if something has spherical symmetry, who cares if it's spinning? So the sun's spinning, who cares? The photons still come out at the same rate, nothing changes. It makes no sense to what it actually is. So what? Who cares? So this is the more obtuse subject where I could go on and on about how even the obtuse subjects you can't even do literally and correctly. I'm talking about these basic things: wave, particle, kinetic, special, squared, quadratically increasing kinetic energy. These are the simple gravity, Benchius versus actual force. These are the more important subjects, frankly. What it should be called is celerity. So this is more like, oh, you should just call it some other stupid word for something that it doesn't do. Electrons don't fucking spin. They don't do anything called spinning. It's basically the same thing as amino acids have, says you. Okay, we have two types of amino acids, I and R. I am simplifying the terms just because left, right here is actually 4, and we aren't talking about biology. So, look, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're saying that you know what the explanation is. I'm saying, no, the explanation, you're not even anywhere close because you have electrons moving all over the place. I'm saying shared electrons are literally shared. The electron is stable, and the two atoms are the things jittering. Okay, and the electron is literally shared. Okay, anyway, the spin is like that. So they are mirror versions of one another. It's not literally they spin. I think the spin has some relation to which direction the electric field goes. So again, electrons are not dipoles. So this whole notion that an electron can spin and it has a dipole moment and it changes its polarity is all bullshit. The only thing that can rotate are magnets, that is dipoles. So you have to have an electron and a proton, and as minimums, a neutron. A neutron could spin. A conversation about neutrons spinning could be rational. But all these other conversations are irrational because if a proton spun, you wouldn't be able to see it. It can't create any manifestation to the rest of the universe that would be in any way noticeable. All right. The magnetic field goes, and it would also break any notion of what the fuck energy is in terms of motion of objects with force vectors. Because somehow you would have to have a force that hit an electron in a way, where the two forces aren't independent anymore. And we already know that even big material objects, the motion stays independent. That is, if I kick a ball off a cliff, the velocity in this direction doesn't affect the velocity that gravity will apply. The forces will be independent. Can certainly be understood as independent. All right, this is a certain thing due to electromagnets existing and the ability to accelerate magnetic objects with two coils, creating rail guns and Gauss guns. Yeah, so and none of that is in any way inconsistent with a less obtuse, silly theory. So a simple theory of how atoms work and how dipoles work can explain those mechanisms. So again, it's just a canard and a lie to sit there and pretend that there's some, oh, you must believe what I believe or you can't explain this thing. Of course you can. Spin is a certain thing in chemistry which I know better, and it has to exist, otherwise the electrons wouldn't be happy sharing the same subshell. So again, it's just absolute nonsense that the electrons are rotating around the nucleus, and it's certainly nonsense to think that somehow atoms are attaching to each other based on having an electron that isn't at the attachment point. That is, the electron goes very far away, and the other atom has no incentive to hang around if the electron isn't there. It needs its bonding to be consistent, or it's not going to stay. Okay, as they repel each other or something. So as or something. I mean, it's just too silly. So again, he keeps arguing that you need it, that somehow no other theory could explain. It's just implied in all of this nonsense that somehow this is the only theory that works, this crazy, silly, nonsensical one. When, of course, other theories, other explanations work. You can look at the lensing images from space, right? And you could look at them and you could say, well, just on the surface, we don't have any details. And you could say, well, what we do know is that if it's going to be gravity, it has to be insanely strong gravity to bend light at those huge distances. So it would have to be spherical. So the first thing you'll notice is that, these lensing images aren't very spherical. Okay, they got tons of mathematical defects in them. They're the wrong shape, they're wrong orientation, and they're sometimes just lousy circles. All right. So what would the argument be is if I said, well, that's residue from an explosion. So that's like a supernova's residue, right? I mean, the heavy bits, the different bits move at different speeds, and you end up with rings. I mean, smoke rings. Not an uncommon phenomenon. Not an unknown phenomenon. Okay, explosions can do that. And the fact is that the explosion's passage through an environment can be non-symmetrical, and they can be crooked. So the two, which one? Okay, I'm just saying, just on a superficially, you could say, well, the fact that there's defects in the geometry makes it pretty much impossible for it to be a gravitational feature, because the gravity would have to be perfectly symmetrical. It'd have to be spherical. And then you're stuck with the argument that what's going to cause the distortion, and the distortion would be caused because there was other masses close to the supernova. There was more matter on the left side than there was on the right side, and therefore the explosion moved through the left side differently than it moved through the right side. Anyway, biology also needs to exist as well as its organic molecules to form correctly due to chemical bonding, following the same rules here. So again, I could go to every single chemistry video online and they'll show you molecules put together, and the molecules don't have anything spinning in them, right? The electrons attached to the protons. I mean, it's all connecting, okay? And so it's just bullshit to say that we have to have orbiting things to be able to make those models. And I would say that those models are closer to the reality than the silly idea that the electrons are spinning around nucleuses and doing all this other crap, or in orbitals, or any of that other nonsense. They're explicitly connecting to each other through those mechanisms. And you absolutely don't need to spin anything or orbit to keep atoms functional. The dynamic of the positive and negative forces, that is the north-south magnetic forces, however you want to look at it. I mean, obviously electrons and protons can easily be understood as magnetic monopoles. Oh, I didn't want to do that. It's always something. You gotta be so careful about what you hit on mouses. It's a silly mouse. The button's too easy to hit. All right, so where were we? Okay, that's somewhere. It's also okay. So also on spin. Okay. Biology also needs it. Organic. Blah blah blah. So anyway, bullshit. Also, thinking of chemistry, using chemistry, you could quite easily prove if neutrons are a proton and an electron. Well, again, you don't even need to prove this. I'm just saying they've already done enough experiments playing with neutrons to know this is what they decay into. And, this idiotic neutrino that you can just ignore. So the neutrino has nothing. It contributes nothing. You really don't. There's no reason to keep it in the story. And the simple truth is that a neutron isn't a neutral particle in any other sense that it has both components. It has a positive charge and a negative charge. So clearly something has a positive charge and a negative charge. You could say, well, it's got $5 of assets and it's got $5 of liabilities. So it's a net zero. So you could think of it as a net zero in the piggy bank because there's an IOU in it and then there's a $5 bill in it. So there's this, but the fact is that its neutrality is circumstantial. It's only neutral when it's bound to other neutrons, frankly. All right, neutrons are a proton and electron in a nucleus by testing the electrophilic or nucleophilic reactions of the two almost identical chemicals. So again, this just has to do with the size of atoms and, more bullshit where you're saying this experiment proves this thing. We're detecting this thing. So just like Stern-Gerlach, you're going to tell me you're looking at electron spin when no, you're just looking at the position of actual atoms that you're going to shoot at different velocities, and you're going to say how much does the magnet get bent. So I could take real magnets, I could take little magnets, and I could have a big magnet and I could distort the big magnet's magnetic field by putting another big magnet next to it and create kind of funny lines, and then I could shoot little magnets into it, okay, at different velocities. And the fact is that some of them at a high velocity won't be able to turn and spin, so they'll end up shooting in directions because they won't be able to turn. And then others going slower will be able to turn, and then they'll go in a different direction because they'll be, orienting themselves to the magnetic field. So depending on the velocity of the particle, you'll get a different outcome. And that's all the Stern-Gerlach demonstrates, right? And they turn it into a whole different fucking story. And that's all you're doing with this crap. You're telling me the only way to interpret this experiment is this way. Bullshit. All right. All right. Also, talking about using chemistry, blah, 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 blah. So we either use let's see, I don't even know what that is, halio, whatever, something, which would be nucleophilic reactions, or an alkaline, which would be electrophilic reactions. So again, we're just talking about how you either you either ionize positive or ionize negative. The chemicals, either one gets to take the electron with it, one ends up minus the electron. Not that complicated. Then we use chemicals which are identical, bar one being made of chemical Xi and its isotope X2, which you'd expect to even a bond electron pair to have the same minor. So we know that the difference in the isotopes is that you've changed the mass, the density, the shape of the nucleus, and that has a real effect. It's not a nothing effect. You have you're screwing with, okay, the basic structure shape of the atom, okay. In the what that is, if charge through the reaction, they indeed, what we're assuming, blah blah blah. So yeah, he's just trying to use jargon and fancy talk. So apparently he knows some chemistry. So he's not a physicist, but somehow, anyway. Now all we need to do is this under standard conditions and repeat it a few hundred times to get a good average and see if we have any significant difference. So again, and all that will tell you what? What are you going to extrapolate from that experiment? Are you going to sit there and say, no other theory could explain? Is that what you're going to say? When did you try any other theories? No. Not sure what value would be significant, but there would be something that seems not a random error. Okay, if there is no significant change, we would have to concede proof that, well, neutrons aren't protons with electrons. So again, how would you possibly be able to prove that without breaking the actual nucleus, all right, and measuring how much energy you have to do it, and measuring where you apply the energy? I mean, I think the simple argument can be made is that what do you think nuclear decay is? Do you think there's actually a ticking time bomb inside the atom, and the atom says, well, it's a certain amount of time, I explode now? Or do you think it's actually just a circumstantial event? That is, there's a circumstance that happens there's a probability of, say, something happening to the atom. Two bits of force hit at exactly the same time from the left and the right at exactly perfect, symmetry, and then the atom splits. But this only happens 1 in a trillion times when the energy hits, right? And so you just look for reasons why you can increase the likelihood of that unlikely event. So you're just saying there's an unlikely event that causes the atom to explode, and we can increase how often that unlikely event happens by creating more of these interactions. So if we heat it, the half-life of the material changes. Okay. And if we see significant change, we would have proof of this. I guess I should really be changing this physics to chemistry to give my explanations and arguments. You should be making those arguments to somebody else, because frankly, I'm not going to argue a bunch of obtuse chemistry experiments when you don't even have any physics experiments to defend your presumptive statements about how atoms are even shaped. You haven't even got the shape of the atoms correct. You can't, again, the most elemental thing in the universe is energy, and the fact is you can't get that right. Okay. Also, my mistake to just say E equals mc squared as the full equation for E equals m squared c to the fourth plus pc, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand it, but I feel like I should correct that, as it explains why particles with no mass can move with momentum. So it just, again, it doesn't explain anything. You're just saying that, well, the equation says that speed, regardless of mass, somehow you don't actually do the multiplications there. I mean, obviously, as soon as you multiply a mass, okay, of 0 times the speed of light, it's not going to do you any good, right? Or the speed of light quadrupled, right? So any multiplication comes up with zeros. So again, it can't have no mass and actually be irrational in the sense of the equations. So it doesn't matter. Reformulating the equation doesn't save it from its zero problem. You can't have momentum if you have no mass. All right. Also, this may clear some things up from what you understand of Einstein's theory. How is that going to clear anything up, you fucking cunt? Oh, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I've made so many fucking arguments. You're not countering any of my arguments. Okay. I personally think he has something wrong. The whole thing is silly, okay? Look, look, there's nothing wrong with saying there's a Planck amount of energy in the universe. Again, I've said this so many times. I mean, what? Do you really think there's some other way to calculate this than to say, look, matter takes up this much space, right? An electron takes up this much space. We know that energy, magnetic fields, whatever you want to call them, all kinds of fields of energy are in the empty space, right? Well, you could just argue, well, what if I took a little circle, a clear circle, okay, and I just captured the stuff in a little amount of space? How much stuff, how much force stuff is in that space? That's what E equals mc squared is basically just saying, that a certain density of space, certain volume of space, has a certain minimum energy. That's what it's got. Okay, averaged over the whole universe, there's this much energy per little unit of space. And so obviously if an electron is occupying the space, it's displacing the energy. Therefore, it ends up having that much energy. Fucking asshole. All right. Oh, God, I just hate people. I personally think he has something wrong, and also the standard model is pretty wrong. So he says you, okay? So no argument, no authority, nothing to judge your opinion by. You just say it's wrong. Oh, amazing. Due to both failing to explain gravity well at quantum or even the scales we'd see in a space station. Neither theory, right? Even his gravitational theory doesn't explain the origins of gravity, right? It doesn't explain a mechanism. It just says it's a bent geodesic. Well, the sun is producing a bent geodesic of photons, right? It's just exactly the same. The sun is radiating photons exactly in the same way, except in the reverse direction of gravity. So if the photons were going into the sun, exactly the same path they were taking going out, if I just reversed what the photons would be doing, it would be visually exactly the same as gravity mathematically. It's exactly how the Stanford guy, what's his name? Fuck. When he does a course, he's the expert on this shit. He does the course, and this is exactly how he explains it as a fluid. He's basically just saying, look, it's a river, okay, a flow of force, and any matter you place in the river is moved by the river of force. I mean, he calls it an anti-divergence, which is hilarious. You know, instead of just saying, yes, it's a convergence. So the photons coming from the sun are diverging. The photons that are pushing us into the Earth are merely converging. All right. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. You know, that you can't concede that, yes, that simple mechanism is true. I don't call the sun a bent geodesic. I don't blame the sun's energy on a bent geodesic. Keep hitting things I don't intend to. Oh, and then you have to sit there and open this again. God damn it. Reality's a bitch. Alright, so that's why I get to this here. Standard model due to both failing to explain gravity well. Okay, anyway, I can't explain it, but here is a video that taught me. Oh, what a gross, disgusting thing this must be. The man seems to explain it very well, and you may like to react to it. Yes, I'll go react to it and point out how you're a fucking asshole to think this has anything to do with reality. Oh, I can't do it in here. Oh, yeah, it shows me the video, but it doesn't show me who did it. So that's of no value to me. Alright, so I open it. See whose video this is. Oh, this floathead physics guy. Alright, so I've already responded to his moronic videos. He's unaccountable again. Just another one of these jackasses who's unwilling to defend the nonsense they spew. Alright, also a piece of proof for part of Einstein's theory is that space-time curvature is the oddity of Mercury and Venus's orbit that doesn't align right with gravity of Newton. So again, where did you get evidence of that? Alright, from... So I haven't heard that there was any misalignment in Venus. Okay. And again, the misalignment in Mercury could just be explained by the sun processing. So if the center of the sun's mass is processing, it has a little wobble in it, explain to me how that explanation doesn't work. Okay, but from this was attempted to be fixed with a planet of asteroids called Vulcan. Look, I don't need to know these silly facts of these. You know, this is all old history. Okay, the fact that they didn't have a perfect explanation, and the fact is that what Einstein produced as an explanation for Mercury, right? He was said, look, Eddington asked him, well, look, okay, you have this nice little theory, blah blah blah. Can you do anything with it? And so, you know, if it's right, then maybe you can explain the precession of Mercury. And so then Einstein took 6 months to create a big pile of math that nobody really understands or can do, right? So are you going to deny that Einstein's field equations, where he created whole new tensors, all kinds of new mathematical mechanisms, is likely to be anything rational, and that it's somewhere hidden in it is some kind of other bullshit? And Einstein, in 1917, Einstein said light is bent the same amount as everything else by gravity. And then in 1919, he changed it to twice as much. So if they had done the experiment in 1917 when they tried to, except the war got in the way, Einstein would have been proven wrong. So isn't that one of those little ironies of history? If they'd done the eclipse experiment when they first wanted to or tried to, Einstein would have been proven wrong. And he would have to revise his theory. But the truth is that no, light isn't bent at all by fucking goddamn gravity, and the fact is the whole thing is a big fat lying canard. The experiment is stupid, and from Earth, in terms of its impossibility as a practical experiment, and it's all it's ever been, and that's why it's never been repeated, is because it can't be repeated credibly. And when they had a perfect 12 noon eclipse over North America, they didn't even try to do it from Earth. That's the big joke. You piece of scum. Alright, anyway, so we'll call that a video for now, and then we'll come back to some of this shit, I suppose. But, what a pile of crap. Yeah, you're not arguing any of my arguments. You're not countering any of my arguments that a much simpler version of the mechanical reality is drawable, modelable, and it works. It explains the double slit. It explains gravity. It explains charge. It explains magnetism, unlike your silly theory. You fucking shithead.